Hello everybody. As you know, a little while back, I think it was 2 days ago, maybe 3, I left a good talk, good long talk, sort of from my heart, I guess you'd say, just on a lot of my feelings on creativity and the energetic aspect of what I felt inside was happening in the world and especially within myself. And I'd like to just continue from that point now that a bunch of days have gone by and a lot has happened, to give you a little bit more in-depth, a little more insight, and also just balance things out a little bit. I got some feedback from that presentation from many friends, and a little bit of feedback was they felt that possibly because I hadn't gone into some of the protocol, that people might misinterpret that by talking about the energetic and transformational positive aspect of something that could be seen as all negative, that this might be seen as irresponsible or portrayed as irresponsible. So I want to cover a little bit of that as well in this talk, as well, aside from going into more depth on the energetic side of things. I also want to go into boosting the immune system and health, and an aspect that I have an issue with Big Pharma and Western medicine, who are amazing, in the area of emergency response. And those comments that I make or that evaluation is nothing to do with individuals, nothing to do with doctors, nurses, people in the front lines, which just like our soldiers, when something happens, all of my love and energy goes to them. I don't know if I could be doing it. I have a lot of respect and a lot of gratitude for them. So this is not at all a criticism on them. It's more on the framework or the larger brain behind it. So I'll just sort of start from there. So what my conversation was with a friend about this last presentation, they didn't have a lot of comments to say, and I wasn't sure what that was about. And it seemed to come out that from a little bit more talking when I mentioned something I watched on YouTube, sort of a presentation by Greg Braden, who I'll go into a little bit more about him. But I had mentioned that Greg Braden had, who is, actually I'll just give you his background because I have it written out here just so I get everything nicely presented here for clarity. So Greg Braden, if you don't know or haven't heard of him, New York Times best-selling author, known for bridging science and spirituality and human potential. His post was called Truth and Fiction Coronavirus. He's often seen with Joe Dispenza. They do a lot of talking, science-based, but going into a lot of energetic aspects and directions and potential of the human being. He was known for merging modern science and wisdom of our past to reveal real-world solutions to the issues that challenge our lives. This is definitely one of those. Puts out a very, in my opinion, when I watched it, it was very informative. It's probably one of the better that I had seen in this respect. Some great visual graphics, very clear. But when I trusted and I listened to my heart, and this came through in both visual elements, how he's presented himself on the front when you look up on YouTube, there's just an odd feeling I get, almost spooky. I don't know if that came across because he's just nervous. It had a feeling, this is me speaking from the heart, to me it had almost a feeling like he had a gun to his head, in the sense that he wasn't speaking deeply from his heart. And maybe that was just the immediacy of the alarm and he didn't know where to go from here, and he's going to follow up with another video message. I'm not criticizing him, I'm just voicing what came to me, and it just seemed odd seeing he's so known for going into, like, based on science and going into that energetic aspect and potential, which is why I watched it, because I was waiting to see what he had to say. that had some optimism to it, and everything he had to say was really I found quite alarming. It just kind of seemed a little bit no hope-ish in there. I'm not saying that was said, but it just was odd. And I give an example, something that came up a few times that I was just, my antenna, my radar was picking up on. Kept referring to things as wreaking havoc. He mentioned wreaking havoc. I didn't count the times, but at least 3 times in the beginning. That the coronavirus wreaking havoc. And I find things like that are not the best terms to be using when you want to keep people calm and feel comfortable, but yet be clear as well. So that was the aspect that I had of this video that I had been chatting about with a friend, and I said that he had missed this part of it, and my friend had said that would be really a good way to approach your next post, to continue what you were talking about before, but would be to go into a little bit of that and then continue on your way. So I just want to mention here, and this is what Greg Braden had mentioned, and it's good information as far as this goes. He mentioned about the whole politically correct aspect. A lot of people have in the past labeled things based on where they came from, what country, what animal, this sort of thing, and people have found that creates sometimes a distortion or a fear-based response. An example would be swine flu or avian flu, that sort of thing, or something signifying that like Wuhan virus or something like that. So those things have been dropped so that there's no connection made, and the virus itself is referred to as SARS-CoV-2. The condition caused by the virus is COVID-19. Now, a lot of you people know this, so just bear with me. This is for people that don't have all this in clarity. They refer to it as a novel virus. It has never been seen before. We have never come across this coronavirus. As far as we know, we have had many coronaviruses come through, so our systems are used to them. We probably all had them and not even noticed the effects of them. So this is what's different. As far as where it came from, how it happened, there's a trillion different views and versions, and no one really knows. So why even go into it? One of the things, the source here was World Health Organization, WHO. Get a lot of conflicting messages and information from them, as from many. But according to them, they said that the mortality rate was higher than the flu. So that's some information that we've been given. Now, just bear with me. I want to just get through all these little details so that I don't get anything wrong. The thing with the issue that I have with Western medicine is it's ruled by Big Pharma. Any large organizations don't operate like a human being with feelings. It's all money based. You may argue with this, and that's fine. I'm not here to argue. This is what I've come to in my beliefs. Just like news and advertising, newspapers, TV stations, they want to get something that sells out there. So giving the truth is not going to necessarily sell. So to fluff it up a bit, put some intense music behind it, appeal to certain weaknesses within you to purchase that product, whatever, put fear into you, whatever sells the product is going to rule. Okay, so Big Pharma has trained all our medical professionals. So keep that in mind. So once again, not criticizing the doctors, surgeons, paramedics, nurses in the profession, just like any other human being, there's ones that wish they weren't there and don't care and are lazy, and there's ones that will put their lives on the line, and many more do than don't. My brother is a nurse, an ER nurse, and an amazing nurse as far as I know. My sister works in reception as a medical secretary. I know from stories they tell, they go through a lot, and they really do have a lot of integrity. So one of the things I find about the training that we also have been put through in believing what reality is by a lot of our scientists and doctors that are trained by Big Pharma is that we've been trained to believe that we are powerless and that everything in our, especially in our healing, comes from outside and has to be given to us, be done to us, that we do not have an innate, vibrant health energy within us. Okay, that's one thing that I have a difficult time with. So that all power comes from outside of ourselves. It's very mechanistic. It's based on a very surface kind of approach. There's not a lot of thought in holistic side of things into how something led to where you got. It's more, here it is, let's burn it out, poison it out, cut it out, get rid of it. Quite often, from what my experience with a more holistic kind of medicine is the approach that we have our own natural ability to heal ourselves within us. Just the same way the wisdom within a woman's body to grow a little human being. A mother having a baby in her womb does not have to consciously figure out how she's going to grow the fetus to the next stage. She definitely, it's a responsibility upon her to know how to support that growth with nutrition, but the mother does not have to know the details. This is just an example of the wisdom that is within us. Our body is, I don't know how many times more, the wisdom that is in ourselves is beyond any wisdom that any scientist or doctor can ever hope to get to. Now, there was another example of distortion that can come from media and from this very mechanistic view as we are all scrambling, and also this mindset as well of that allows for and potentiates panic and confusion and disorientation are conflicting articles and reports about what's going on. Like one article said that Italy estimates the death toll as 88% coming from this, the situations from people dying from coronavirus that were over 70 years old, most of them. Okay, now that got reevaluated, and a doctor was quoted as saying, "We code our deaths generously." And what he meant by that, as far as I was told and I understand, is that they included anyone who died that had coronavirus, not who died from the coronavirus. That would be like someone smokes a joint and then drinks 2 bottles of whiskey and dies in a car crash and say that he died from THC poisoning or something. It's that much of a distortion. It's false information, distorted information, and that sort of stuff gets us all freaked out and wound up. So this is why I'm warning people, be respectful of protocols. Even if you do the as if technique, act as if the information at hand is true. Wash your hands, social distancing, practice that. Whatever you need to do to cover those bases. But then once you've covered those bases, you don't need to sit and watch the news and allow it to wind you up and cause a lot of stress. Now, one of the things about stress, as many know, is it just depletes your immune system. So it's actually going against any potential for healing. So you might be washing your hands 50 million times and staying away from everyone, and at the same time you're eating sugar I've seen the lineups at McDonald's and Tim Hortons at their drive-ins. It's insane. How people, and also shelves for this pasta and bread are empty. So people are loading up on carbs and sugars, going to McDonald's, thinking somehow that they're going through the drive-in, so that's going to keep them safe. And they're stressing out over things, watching TV, that's stressing them as well. And somehow that's supposed to save them. I think, this is my feelings, trust your bullshit detector. And this is what I want to get into a little bit of is, how do you get into your heart? How do you get into your feelings? How do you trust that antenna receptor transmitter that is, I believe, naturally within you? And how do you develop it? How do you learn how to trust it? And how do you learn to go with that, to discern and decipher through all this mess and to know what to do, what not to do? So we've already said we cover our bases that the medical system has told us. Mentioned about how the Greg Braden talk was missing something that I wanted to get more into. So now that we've covered that, one last thing was I wanted to mention is a quick example of how misinformation, maybe with good intent, who knows, goes viral. And I've been sent maybe about 6 times from well-intended friends a small audio that sounds like it's from a nurse from some island. She's translating something from Spanish from some Dr. Negrine, as far as I could understand the name. It was like fourth party information and a translation from one language to the next. The first thing that she mentions is that this information that from Chinese medical staff who now know all about the virus, which we don't know all about the virus, so that was one thing right there. But it's designed to make you feel like, okay, this is the real information now. Drop all the other stuff, update to this. And it was all taken from autopsies of dead people with blocked, hardened lungs. So right away, what's happening to you when you hear all this stuff? I'm sure you've heard it. I paid attention to what my system did when I heard it. Everything tensed up. I started to feel like I had a sort of a respiratory thing. The imprint that it came from dead people, the autopsy, so therefore many deaths. All it did was get me wound up and more tight and more stressed. And that's even when myself, I'm aware of these things, so I'm a little more able to work with that sort of thing. But for someone who's not, that could have set them into a total depletion of their energy, a victim dynamic. Not a good thing, not helpful at all. Lots of fear.
Plus, it's coming from China.
Plus, the information is coming from China. And that was the whole reason, and I'm not talking about Chinese public, Chinese citizens, I'm talking about Chinese government. We have already, from example, we cannot trust anything that comes from the Chinese government. Even the fact that it was held back, the information, until way too late, was because of the Chinese government. Okay, so, almost got distracted there. Okay, so I've got a little diagram that I did here. What I'm suggesting is there's a transition that you can make from this sort of realm of physicality where you have to visit sometimes to cross-check, to get from A to B, to cross a street, to set up a protocol. It's necessary, but don't stay there, because it's also a hall of mirrors and you'll get trapped in all this other crap that you can get trapped in. So what I'm suggesting is a concept and a symbol of a crucible. Now, I looked up the meaning of crucible, and it is a container in which metals or other substances are melted down and subjected to very high temperatures. This is a great metaphor for where we are at and the conditions we are under right now, and why I'm going to suggest that this is a very sacred place, and more so as sacred because the whole world is going through it at the same time, and we have a way of communicating, which is good and bad, but we're not locked off from each other. We are physically, but we have a way of communicating. So this crucible is supercharged right now, this potential. And I've drawn a little picture of it, of this crucible. I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit on it. But that's what we're in right now. So it's not bad to be in the conditions and the feelings of suffering, feeling fear, feeling anxiety, feeling like a victim, feeling powerless, feeling emotions like hate, feeling cravings, feeling anger, apathy, shame, confusion. These are all natural. So don't get down on yourself for feeling these things. But just trust in your own abilities and powers that you can shift in this crucible with love, courage, with using your heart energy. And I mean, not just love for other people, but love for yourself. Have compassion for yourself. Don't judge yourself. And you can shift alchemically in that transformation. You can shift that energy into expansion, from contraction to expansion, from fear to love, from suffering to courage. You can go into areas and experience peace, joy, love, acceptance, bliss, serenity, understanding, forgiveness, and trust. Now, in that place, which I'll go through some ways of getting there, ways of shifting that, and working with these energies. In doing this, in facilitating this, what you do is you shift into what I like to call the chrysalis. Now, in the chrysalis, you connect to, I'll call the cosmic heart, or the cosmic World Wide Web. Another metaphor would be, if you know anything about mushrooms, would be the mycelial network, but on a cosmic level. So that place where we're all connected and we can all have this sort of heart communication, and people start to just do things because they feel right, and then it just turns out the timing was amazing and perfect. And I'll give you examples of that as well. Oh gosh, I've got so many good examples. If I can just remember them without going on too far, I'll talk quicker so I can have time for that. So this is the shift. In this place, you have these greater abilities that you had before, but you've mostly been locked out of, and quite often you just occasionally have little glimpses of this, and you go, whoa, deja vu, oh, synchronicity, oh, this. So just to not forget where I am and these points that I've made, I want to give some examples. So we've gone over the crucible and the chrysalis. I want to mention ways of facilitating this shift from these lower, baser emotions and places where you're more likely to be controllable and acting in fear, do anything out of desperation that is said. And as I had already gone through, there can be a lot of misinformation. If you act on misinformation, it's a detriment to your own being, and it also drains you of energy that you need for your health, and it's especially important now. So let's say, well, my example, because it's what I do, I create, I tattoo, I work with a very healing energy that I've developed over, I don't know, since the 80s, working with my clients, and a lot of it's based on their feedback, so it's a sharing model that's happened, and I've learned that the body is an antenna, transmitting, receiving from the heart as an organ of perception. And I've also found that by being creative, and the least mediated as possible in my creative energy that I work in, I fall into a natural state where my mind has let go and something else takes over, and I'll call it the heart for lack of a better term. I think it is quite accurate. There's a lot of scientific work done by Heart Math Institute, for example, where they've found that the heart is an organ of perception. Many have, and the heart has neurons. Also now a lot of information about the gut brain and gut health, gut-mind connection as well. So many of you are aware of that, and I'll get into some of that in the nutritional slide that I'll cover later as well for the gut. So things that you can do to facilitate this shift. You're feeling anxiety, you're feeling powerless, you're feeling fearful. First thing is to acknowledge that you are feeling this and to love yourself even though you're feeling this. Do not get down on yourself. You've got to bring in some awareness. That's where mindfulness meditation comes in very handy. If you can do a little bit of meditating, if you can't sit still and just have a blank mind or just let thoughts come up, then try a guided meditation of some kind. They can be very, very helpful. And I'm actually going to post a link for one that came up, and it's actually a really good example of this idea that when you connect to this cosmic worldwide web within your heart, you start to just do things on impulse, creative impulse, that you have no mind direction, just the way a mother can develop a child within her womb. You will just start to trust and do things that later unfold to have been exactly in the right timing for something to facilitate someone else's process. And a good example of this is, well, actually, a couple that I did in the fall around Halloween. I did a pumpkin carving, and you can go into that. I'm not going to get into any detail, but it was all based on a healing aspect that I was generating. I had no idea what was to come with this. And then later, and now I'm still working on it, is the polar bear skull carving for bear medicine. And that is all about healing. I had no idea that this was coming, but I was trusting something, and this unfolded. So I was much more prepared. Now, this other example, actually, a friend of mine who is a yoga teacher went and did, probably finished a couple of months ago, but went and did a 3-month Vipassana meditation. She had no idea she was preparing herself for this time. Now she's able to share a lot of this experience with others. And this other example, I wrote it down somewhere, was this video that I absolutely loved. I'm going to have it posted if I don't find it. And I think the Italian word, which is the name of the video, oh, here it is, I can see it. The Italian word means listen. And it's, if I can pronounce it correctly, ascoltate, which they say a letter from the virus. I posted it actually a couple of posts ago, but I'll also have it as a link in my YouTube of this named the same as what this is named as. I'll figure out what we're going to call it. So that is a very good example of something that you could, I suggest everyone watch it. If you pay attention to your heart center as you watch it, it's not just the information. And this is the example, a very good example of how art and creativity can cross the boundaries of what is limited in the mechanistic world of rational thinking, which I refer to as sort of the particle versus the wave. Something can be a particle or it can be a wave. You can go into the mind and sometimes be stuck in mechanistic world, and you get stuck in the hall of mirrors, or you can learn how to facilitate this smoother and easier movement and transition into the heart and the wave world, and therefore surf the wave rather than be battered by it, not knowing where is this coming from. So once you learn how to work between the two, I'm not saying abandon the mind, it's very important, but keep the mind as a secretary. So other ways of facilitating this, I said meditation, creativity, drawing, painting, any sort of thing like that. My wife is trying to whisper something to me. Oh yes, actually, yeah. My nephew, Alex, which I've also shared, so you'll find that as well on YouTube. Or no, I shared it on Facebook, I think, because Instagram you can't always share videos and things. So he's an amazing DJ and musician in general, and he got inspired, and he was at home by himself, and he was DJing this wonderful, wonderful heart-centered music to everyone. So there's so many places you can go to sort of get connected with this heart-centered projection from many people that are linking into this this energy. that is basically our birthright. It is our potential that we visit momentarily, usually by accident. Some people have trained in it. What's valuable and amazing about this time, and I'll give you some quotes by David Goggins, this is where he was a specialist, is when you're in a place of suffering and fear, where you feel like you cannot deal, you cannot persevere, this is not for you, all those uncomfortable feelings, and you go into victim and suffering. He is the master, in my opinion, on this, and I'll just give you a couple of quotes from him. If you're in this place and you're frustrated with how do you get out, first learn about it and its potential, and Goggins is the guru on that. Here's some of his quotes. Don't live in an external world. Go inside yourself. Admit your weakness. That's another important part. Don't lie to yourself. To grow in life, be willing to suffer. He also mentioned a brief bit, just using exercising as an example. You may only have to exercise, go to the gym for 1 hour a day. You might feel like, oh, I just can't pull myself through it. But he says, you're only going to be suffering for an hour to have all these amazing benefits. So keep that in mind. If you're feeling like you're suffering, it's not all the time. This too shall pass. But the benefits in this crucible, which you might at the moment be feeling as suffering, is immense. You have no idea. And this is why I say it's magic what is happening right here. If you can learn to acknowledge and facilitate this change, turn fear on itself. There's a longer one. The mind is the most powerful thing in the world. The mind, and I would say the heart as well, and the gut. The mind has capabilities that are so unknown, and being able to tap into that is on the other side of suffering. So see that suggestion that there's a way to flip that which is perceived as suffering, and that's where I go from particle to wave. It's just a perception change. It's a shift that is so simple once you get it, that you can get better and better at shifting into it at will. Okay, so important aspect is trust your feelings. Learn how to listen to your heart's messages. Each person is going to have their own abilities, and some of those abilities at first could come across as anxiety, for example. Things that you are not comfortable with and that you want to get rid of, you want to suppress. You want to smoke a joint to get rid of that, or take a swig of vodka to suppress something that actually might be one of your gifts coming through, one of these abilities. And that's why I suggest strongly that you at least try to work with things and see if you can recognize some of these coming through that you first thought was actually something going against you. And I'm a great example of that. For about 20 years when I was younger, when I was 30, I went through crazy, insane insomnia and anxiety and panic attacks, and I didn't know what was happening to me. I actually felt like I might be losing my mind or something. I was looking up all these illnesses, trying to figure out what it was, because it was so intense. Long story short, I found over time that it was actually my own inert ability, like my being was communicating to myself, but I had left it so long and ignored the messages for so long that it was now yelling. And that's what I started hearing the yells, and I was just going, I ran to Western medicine. I got to find a way to suppress this. I've got to, my concept of fixing it, I was broken. I wasn't broken. I was more whole than I ever realized. It was phenomenal, but it took me 20 years to figure that out. And a lot of that wisdom that I gained from that is what I'm using now for everything that I do. So keep that in mind, and once again, go to David Goggins for all this wisdom. Can't Hurt Me, his book, is absolutely fantastic for this. I'm sure all of the information he's been sharing and how he's come so big, so many people know about him, and this is way before this happened. And then boom, all these experts now in their fields who had no clue this was going to happen, and they're ready, they're online, and they're ready to help. And you are too, once you make this shift to the heart. Okay, so Let me see if I've forgotten anything. I think I've got all this covered. So now, as long as I've got all this out of the way, then I want to go into the best person I can think of. Actually, two of them. I'm going to have all these links in my YouTube site as well. Dr. Mindy Pelz, MindyPelz, and Dr. Eric Berg, Berg, and I think it's ERIC. They are probably the best people to go to for this, and this is in the area of supporting your immune system, and also in seeing your system as having what it needs to protect itself. Not to feel that to embrace this and to learn about this is to throw away the other view. One of the things I've found in moving to a new level of conscious awareness is it's not always either or. It's not a flat dimension of one or the other, on, off. It's multiple levels of quite often things that seem to contradict that work with each other. An example I give my clients when I'm doing my tattoos is the idea of a telescope. And you've got all these lenses that work with each other to get the effect, to bring an image in close enough for you to see. If you have that telescope, you didn't know anything about it, and you had it sideways, those lenses are not going to do any value at all. It's got to be used in the right way. And I find that this new level of consciousness that we're moving into, which I refer to metaphorically at least as 5D, not 5G, not to be confused. 5D is just the idea that we're moving into a level which, at first, as we move into it, it's all heart opening based, trusting your gut, using your mind, but in succinct alignment with these other brains. But you need to start to layer things, is how I find it. So the example that I'm using is based on Western medicine protocols, and then this view of a more holistic way of perceiving the being. You don't have to abandon the other. Keep that as a framework, and then move over and learn about this. And keep them both on your desk. Work between them. But anyway, so now that I've just said that, we have been following this forever, and anyone that's followed our posts, they know this. We're always posting about diet, and maybe some people now they know, but they may have wondered why on my tattoo page, my art page, am I every so often posting things about diet. For myself, I need to support my system to be the best receiver transmitter I possibly can, to be able to work from the place of my heart, to facilitate the healing that I do with my tattoos, with my skull carving, with my paintings. I also need to be a good example for others so that they ideally come in for work rather than relying purely on, for example, my tattoo to shift their whole life, that they can learn that they too need to invest some time and energy into a holistic approach. So it's not just the tattoo, it's not just the yoga, it's not just the exercising, it's not just the walks. So nutrition. Support your immune system. Acknowledge that your being has so much wisdom in it. It is phenomenal. What did Mindy Pelz say? We are a miracle. And we are. And so many of us are in denial of that. In Western medicine,